options, and you can choose one of these if you choose. Because if you keep it like this, what essentially is going to happen is that the cuff is much, much smaller than this length. Your cuff is not the length of the bottom of the hem of the sleeve. So in this case, if I kept it that way, then I would probably just gather it all, because it's the only way it's going to fit into here. But you can see that on this French cuff, there's 3 pleats. And if you choose to want a pleat, there is an option for 2 pleats or 1 pleat. And you just put it in there. And then you change it. These under seams change. They come in a little. There's also an option for 1 pleat. The pleat is always close to the placket, and it's always on the longer of the 2 sides. So the placket actually gets sliced open so that you can add the placket to it. And how do we do that? It's not even on the syllabus. So the pleats are never on this short portion of the sleeve. It's always on the longer portion. This is also the portion that would get gathered. This would get gathered with 2 rows of basting to fit inside of the cuff, because the cuff is only this big. Even on this size small, size 12, you can see that the opening is much greater than the sleeve is much greater than what the cuff is. If you don't want anything and you want a plain sleeve, well, they have you take off 1 3/4 here and 1 3/4 there, so that you know. And then they shift this over 3/4 of an inch. So pick and choose. If you don't pick and choose, then you'll just gather it in. It'll be the easiest thing. So the cuff itself is also in the same section on the next page. Their cuff is 2 inches high. Thus we took 2 inches off. And it is 9 inches. There's another section with other cuffs that say that it's 8.5. So what essentially you need to do, did I leave my ruler by you? No, pink? Is that yours? Or is that mine? Is that mine or yours?
Yeah.
So take a piece of paper and fold it. The fold is going to be the edge of the cuff. There's 2 ways of doing it, and you've done one. One is that you have a top and a bottom cuff and you sew them together. This is just one cuff. It's a very fast and generic way to make a cuff, but you're just drafting the one side, you'll staple it, and then you'll cut it out. So this cuff is 2 inches high. So from the fold, just use your ruler, it's 2 inches wide, to mark it out. On one side, you can draw the left. This is going to be 9 inches long, in accordance to what the text is saying. And then they add a 1 inch extension. I don't think anybody ever uses it.
What is it for?
It's an extension that your button would go on so that it then closes. Do you see on here, they have a band, which is also the cuff. And it just gets attached and it extends past the edge.
So in our project, we have a choice between deciding we want darts and not darts.
We don't have any darts. Oh, on the bodice?
Yeah.
You can use them or you don't have to.
So
They're on the pattern for the future reference if you want to use them, but you don't have to use them. This is the cuff. Our seam allowance is a 1/2 inch to be attached to the shirt. You can do a 1/2 inch on the rest of it too. Otherwise, it's a 1/4 inch on the short sides. It's supposed to hail, and that really irks me. I've been in a horrific hail storm once where you could see the windshield bowing in, and it never broke.
Caught in a hailstorm. Literally, what was it?
And so
Last year
anytime it
March.
hails, I get paranoid
Yeah.
because it was
Like my head was
Wait, is it
hit
in
by the
Illinois?
rock.
it was in
I was running
Wisconsin.
so fast. Because I was, huh?
But you could see, and I was under a viaduct, but the hail was going this way, like baseballs. They were like this big.
Oh my God.
And they were coming horizontally across. And I was underneath the expressway. And you could see the window bowing, like I was just waiting for it to break.
What did you even do in that? Like, it stressed me out so bad.
You couldn't do anything. You just sat there. With the rest of the traffic, we all were hiding underneath viaducts. So the cuff is done. So what you want to do is you are going to rough cut this out. You will want to staple. Can you get a stapler? I doubt it'll work, but we can try. I usually pin this, thank you. So starting from the fold, you have to stabilize the two sides. Otherwise, when you go to cut it, they're gonna slide and you won't have a mirrored image. So stabilize the whole thing. And then you can cut out the cuff. Oh, what's that?
My brother.
So your cuff gets attached to that. So this section, if you don't do anything with the pleating or whatever, you're going to want to gather that. But it just look for that in the book.
But this is curved though, so how does and that's
You
straight.
force it, and it forces it. Oh, I erased it. Just line up the edges, and so. So take these out. There's a thing over there, but I think it'll ruin.
I'm confused.
And I will stabilize each side with pins. Well, I'll pin it together. This just rips out with this paper. Unless you can take your time and take it out, which I'm not trying. Always, always, always transfer the information to the opposite side. This is just one side of your pattern. So I have seam allowances drawn on here, so I'm going to open this up and I will draw the grain line. So there's the pattern. My grain line can be down the fold. It can also be this way, so you can pick and choose, or you can send it out so that you can use both. If I had a decorative, if I was doing a stripe blouse and I wanted the stripes to go across rather than up and down, I would change the grain.
Could you use bias?
You could cut on bias if you want to. Just remember that it's going to stretch. Usually it's cut in this direction because you want the strength of the fabric going around your wrist and not going up and down, but it's not to say that you can't, if they ever showed one. There's another section that has cuffs in it and it's a little bit smaller. But so I have information here. I have 1/4 of an inch. So put it on your pattern. Don't just leave it to one side. Shirt, cuff, size 6, cut 2. Now it's done, minus the fact that it looks really ugly.
Wait, so the top is 1/2 inch and then the sides are
The-
1/4 inch? No, wait.
This is the edge that gets attached to the shirt. I'm gonna put a 1/2 inch here, so I'll have a 1/2 inch here,
Oh, and then the other ones are 1/4 inch, right?
1/4 of an inch.
Okay.
And this one, in this case, just gets folded with the right sides together like making a welt, and you just sew that and you sew that, and you flip it right side out. You can certainly make it where you have a top and a bottom, so there'd be separate pattern pieces if you wanted.
Oh, that makes sense.
So that could be a notch, that could be a notch. So it's intended that this is supposed to stop. This edge, this extension, is supposed to be overlapping on the opposite side when you sew it. I've never seen anybody sew it that way. They just put this entire thing in. Because if you have a placket in there, then it just will close like that. but it's really this big. But if you had the extension, then it really would overlap a little. And then therefore you would put your buttonhole on there. And that buttonhole goes in the center. The extension is added. So this is where your button would go in the center of the cuff. And it doesn't look like it's the center because this is a seam allowance. So really your cuff is from there to there, not including that. And that's a cuff. If you wanted to make a French cuff like this one is, then you just double this information. So it's 4 inches by 10. But that's literally what it is. There's no button on a French cuff, it's just buttonholes. Because you would fold this up, and then your cuff link, oh, I'm doing it backwards. Fold it up, and then the cuff link goes through and holds it like that on the body, rather than like that on this type of cuff. So this type of cuff is just a standard barrel cuff. There's 3 main barrel cuffs. There's standard, clipped, and shaped. So a standard is a rectangle. A clipped is a rectangle with the corners cut off. That's what the Creatures of the Wind shirt is over there. Its cuff looks like that. And then the shaped is up and around and down. So it's a shaped one. It's rounded. So they just round off the edges. But then in this case and in this case, you need to have an upper and an under. There's no cut on fold. I think we should go home now. Any questions on cuffs?
Fashion department sleepover.